Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Well, hello, Karen. Another wonderful day, and we've made it to July.
I know, right? This year is just flying by so fast. I cannot believe July is here, and camp season is here, and fair season's coming up. It's just getting crazy now.
Bear season.
Not bear season, fair season.
Oh.
So anyway, things are just starting to go really super fast, and I'm actually looking forward to a vacation at the end of this month or after our national conference is over. So
That's right. We're actually presenting on this show, so it's very exciting that it's getting a lot of recognition, and we hope everyone's enjoying it, and we try to make things as fun and straightforward as we can, and just get the message across for Extension and get some good information out there that people can use and for everyone, right?
Right.
Whether you have a large farm or just backyard grower.
Or just want to learn about the American agricultural system. We really appreciate all the support of our listeners, and we love getting feedback from you. So if you have the opportunity, we do encourage you to send us some feedback. You can either send us an email or give us a call at the office, or we have an online evaluation that you're welcome to fill out. And we do encourage you to contact us and let us know what you think of the show. It helps give us ideas for new shows and also helps us know how well we are getting our message across to you. So thanks to all you out there who have helped make our show popular.
That's right. And in fact, today's topic is something that came from people asking questions, calling the office. So we figured we would touch on the topic and just put the information out there even more so that people, if they weren't sure about something, maybe we can clear things up. Maybe we could just introduce them, but the information's out there, and we try to give topics that are relevant, interesting, and fun. So that's how today's topic came about.
I don't know how fun poison hemlock is, but it is interesting and it is relevant.
Well, I was thinking about the show. Okay, the show is fun.
Yes. So poison hemlock, this is something that we've been getting a lot of calls about because it's flowering right now, and it is everywhere. It's in ditches, it's on hillsides, it's in hayfields, it's in gardens, it's everywhere. And it has a really bad rap associated with it in that it was the plant that was used to create the poison that killed Socrates. It's got a long history behind it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I've gotten a lot of calls myself on poison hemlock, and people ask me, when did this nasty plant get here? And I say, well, this plant was used to kill Socrates few thousand years ago. So, it is native to Europe, but it didn't take long for it to reach the New World.
Yeah, it was actually brought over as an ornamental, of course, in the 1800s. So it's been here a long time, and it is spread all across the United States. So it's pretty much everywhere. If you're in our listening area, you probably have poison hemlock somewhere around you. Maybe not the edges of Canada there, but it is all over the United States. But it's only become really well known in this area in the past year or two, where it's just becoming more and more prevalent. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about how to identify it and, what does it look like? Where does it grow? And then also, is it a problem? Should I be worried about it? And the answer is kind of, you should be worried about it, but don't panic over it. All right.
Well, and it didn't just arrive because it's been here for as long as I've been here. Mm-hmm. People are like, well, I've never seen it until this year. Well, maybe that's true. But
it's just becoming more and more prevalent, I think, is the problem.
Exactly. I was about to make a joke. It's seen you plenty of times.
And so this is a plant that Like we said, it is an invasive weed, but it's been here for a good long time. And it looks a lot like our Queen Anne's lace or our wild carrot in that it has a broad, flat cluster of little tiny flowers called an umbel at the very top, and they're bright white, and they're actually really pretty. They have a fern-like leaf, and they have a tall, thick stem that it's green with purple splotches on it.
Yeah, it's actually in the carrot family, just like all those other plants that you named. It's a biannual, so it has 1 year of vegetative growth where it's just growing on the ground. Just what it does is it spits out leaves in a circular pattern called a rosette. And it's not until the following year, and it has that really deep taproot, that it sends up this huge stalk. And that's when people notice it.
Right.
Because that stalk would just shoot up in the air anywhere from 3 to 8 feet tall. You have these huge white umbel flowers that are like little landing pads for butterflies. And then those purple splotches are so noticeable.
Yeah.
And that is a very distinguishing feature.
Yeah, and another thing, when you're looking at those purple splotches, you'll notice that the stem is smooth. There are no hairs on it. Well, our native wild carrot and Queen Anne's lace do have hairy stems. So as kids, we learned that Queen Anne has hairy legs. So that's one of the things you can use to help remember that this particular plant has no hair on the stem.
That's good. I've never heard that one, but
I love those little that help you remember. It's just fun.
yeah, well, I mean, that's good information. And honestly, though, the point that I always say is look for the purple, because once you see the purple, you can't not see the purple. And that one, it's like a flag. It's like, yes, I am poison hemlock. I am not any lookalikes.
Indeed. It also gets very big. I mean, the plant, like Dan said, it can be up to 8 feet tall. More typically, it'll top out about 6, but it depending on where it's growing and how happy it is, it can get pretty big, but it does get very bushy. And so once it's in bloom, it gets a little bit harder to see those stalks inside of it. But also the flowers, the umbels, the groupings of flowers are a little bit smaller than on our wild carrot and our Queen Anne's lace. So that's important to note as well. So you might have to kind of look in close to see. Now, the problem with using the flowers to identify and the big stems to identify it is once it has gone up into that flowering reproductive structure, that's not the best time to control the plant. So like Dan mentioned, it is a biennial, which means it has 2 years of growth stages. So the first year, it is in a rosette stage where it lays really flat against the soil. And then the second year is when it goes into its reproductive stage. And so it's really important to try to find it in the rosette stage if you want to try to control it. Because it's one, if you spray it when it's in the flowering stage, it's not going to have as great of an impact for control. The plant's still going to try to make seeds and spread itself all over the place.
I guess it's true that when it's bolted, it's not the best time to spray it. But, think of it this way too, that this plant also grows in clusters. So you will be pretty effective in killing the first year vegetative growth that hasn't bolted, but it's not as receptive to the chemical when it's in a flowering stage. And that's true for all weeds. And the bigger the weed, the harder to kill.
Yeah, and so, similar to Canadian thistle, once you can really see it, you've missed your chance to control it before it really could cause a problem. So one of the things that we do worry about with this plant is that it does have some toxic components to it. There is a furocumarin in the sap and seeds that can be a skin irritant, but more importantly, there is and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this, there is a coniine or gamma-conicine, depending on the age of the plant, but those chemicals are the ones that can actually cause cause skeletal defects in a developing fetus. And so let's just say you have some livestock out in a field in this early spring, and you have some pregnant livestock. They're out there and they eat the leaves and the stems of this quickly growing plant. That can actually cause them to have defects in the calves, or the offspring. So one of the things, like if you've ever heard of crooked calf syndrome, where the spine is bent or the legs are deformed, that can be a result of hemlock poisoning. So it's really important, if you are grazing animals and poison hemlock is in your pasture field, that you don't allow pregnant animals in that field in the early spring when it's actively growing, because that's when the toxins are are strongest.
Yeah, in fact, all the parts of this plant are poisonous, as far as
Yeah.
flowers and stems and leaves and roots. It will cause birth defects, but in higher doses, I mean, it's going to cause, it's a neurotoxin, so it's going to cause trembling, loss of coordination, depression. It might put your animal in a coma. It could kill them if they eat enough of it too. But most herbivores are trained to detect like a bitterness about things, and hopefully, and it's not always the case, and a lot of times animals kind of suspect poisonous plants and they stay away from it unless it's the only thing there.
Right.
And honestly, when you're talking about a pasture situation, where you see poison hemlock a lot is right on the fence row.
Yeah.
So it's another reason to make sure you're cleaning up your fence row. One, the conductivity for an electric fence is very important and very crucial to keep your animals in. Two, having that growth around the fence just causes it to decline faster. But also, that is where potentially toxic plants grow. And if it's a dry summer and you're running out of paddocks, the animals might start looking to the fence rows for forage. And, that's when they might really come into contact with something like this and cause problems, whether it's a birth or defective calf, or possibly you might lose that entire cow.
This is true, yeah. And you can notice some symptoms, could be frequent urination, a rapid, weak pulse, dilation of the eyes. Those are things that you can look for. Muscle tremors, incoordination, if they're salivating a lot or they look like they have abdominal pain, those are times where you definitely want to reach out to your local vet and have them come take a look, especially if you know there's poison hemlock in your fields. But unfortunately, a lot of times you don't know, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's a lot of times you don't know, like when it's in the vegetative state, like you were saying. I was just going to say, chemical control is usually the best way to do it because you don't touch it at all. But, not to say that you can't, if you understand what you're doing and you understand, this plant is nasty, I don't want to ingest anything, wearing gloves, making sure that you're throwing it in an area that's not going to be any harm to anyone. But, you can pull this stuff up with the proper protective equipment, and so gloves, obviously don't get into it too much. If it does brush up against you, it's not going to kill you right away. No, I mean, it's not like that.
Right. Yeah.
But just understand, don't rip it out with your bare hands and then, go fix yourself a jar of lemonade or something. Just kind of understand what you're doing and just take precautions accordingly. This stuff, for it to become toxic, it needs to be ingested. But like Karen was saying, there are parts of it that are skin irritant as well. And some similar plants, that some lookalikes to poison hemlock, do have that blistering effect on your hands. And, if you get that sap, if you're handling it too much, it's an irritant.
One thing that the white flowers make people think of is giant hogweed. And while the flower is similar, the leaves are very, very different. And so it's important to recognize what the plant is that you're working with and know its potential effects. Now, with giant hogweed, it's a phytotoxin or phototoxin, and that means that it needs sunlight to take effect. So if you can keep yourself covered and wash it off before the sun hits it, then you'll be much better off. But it is an irritant, and so long sleeves gloves are recommended if you're going to be pulling it out by the roots, which is a great way to control it. Or if it's in the rosette stage in the spring, when you go out doing your scouting, or if you're going to just go out and treat the field in general, it's going to be low to the ground, so a weed wiper wouldn't be as effective. But if you're going to do take your boom sprayer out, if you have a field that's pretty heavily infested with hemlock this year, you may want to do that for prevention of next year's plants. And another way you can tell the difference just by looking out into the field is the time of year where the blooms are starting. So peak bloom for poison hemlock is late May, early June, whereas Queen's Lace is mid to late June to July. And so, you're going to see the poison hemlock blooming earlier than Queen Anne's Lace.
Yeah, some other products you can use. I mean, glyphosate, so Roundup will work. And it says here, make sure you're using the proper rate for the plant. And when you look at a glyphosate label, it will tell you what rate you need to get a kill on a specific weed. So make sure you pay attention to that, because a lot of times that's crucial.
Right.
The optimal application times are from bud to bloom. But once it goes past bloom, that's when the plant is basically just winding down, metabolism slowing down, and it's not going to take that chemical.
It's getting ready to die anyway. So make seeds and go away.
So we're late for it. I mean, it's been in bloom for maybe a month, so we're way past the spraying time. But so glyphosate is a non-selective herbicide. It's going to kill everything. So great for fence rows, right? Even if you're trying to clear an area, yeah, glyphosate will work. It'll kill everything. I say that with caution. But something to use like in your pasture field, something to use maybe in a lawn setting or something like that, is a broadleaf herbicide. So something that is very selective for broadleaf weeds. And what that means is it's not a grass. It's not a monocot. Products like Crossbow are 2,4-D and Triclopyr. Triclopyr is something that works very well in pastures, and 2,4-D is a broadleaf herbicide that also works well in many settings. And using two chemicals together is a great way to get control of things too. But that Triclopyr 2,4-D combination does not kill grass. So if you're trying to just target broadleaves, this is a product you can use. If you're trying to clean up a fence row, glyphosate is probably your better option.
Right. And on your pasture, depending on what you're looking at as far as your other weeds, you could also use metsulfuron, for example, Cimarron Plus or Escort. There's also a new herbicide, Duracor, that will also work. All of these are labeled for use in pasture and hay fields. But again, your best effect is going to be to apply in the early spring. Like April to May, when it's still in that rosette stage and they're starting to grow actively. And if you have questions about how much to put on or things like that, contact your local extension office and we can help you determine that. We do also recommend, if you are using the metsulfuron, that you do use a non-ionic surfactant to help it have a greater impact. Also, make sure when you're using any herbicide that you are aware of any hay or manure restrictions related to that herbicide, so that you are following the proper guidelines. Always read the label and make sure that the label is A, identified for the use of where you're using it, B, it's identified for use on the weed you're trying to treat, and C, that you know what restrictions are associated with re-entry intervals and utilizing hay and or manure from fields treated with that chemical.
Right on. Talking about restrictions and label, that is the first thing that I like to go to when somebody walks into my office and says, "Hey, Dan, I have this weed. I need to kill it. What should I use?" First question out of my mouth right back at them is, "What do you do?" or good morning. It's always nice to establish a little bit of etiquette. So it's, but then after good morning, it's, what is it that you do in that field? And why is this weed a problem? So, and then what that does is that starts making you look at the restrictions. Well, this product would work, but can you live with not being able to sell hay now for 18 months? Oh, well, no, I don't think I can accommodate that. Well, if you don't use that field at all for hay production, maybe you could, Some things have grazing restrictions, some things have lactating restrictions, some things have hay restrictions, and it all depends on what fits the use of that area, your farm, whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
So there might be a few products, and yes, there might be something that works a little better according to the research, but it's just not part of your management, so you probably shouldn't use it. It'll do you more harm than good.
Yeah, and there is one thing that has no restrictions, and that is mechanical control. So mowing can help to manage it. It will not get rid of it, but it can help to prevent it from going to seed, and after 2 years, it's going to go away. Now, there is some indication that this plant can persist for more than 2 years. It's not fully understood why or how sometimes that happens, but sometimes it has been seen to be more of a perennial rather than a biennial. So if you're observing that, you would probably want to move towards a chemical control versus mechanical control like mowing or weeding.
Yeah, and that happens with quite a bit of weeds too, where it's a biannual perennial. I can't remember how they classify it, but it's not too uncommon for that to happen with especially noxious weeds. They find every way possible to live and be a nuisance.
Yeah, this is true. It's unfortunate too. But I will say that if you are going out there to control, let's say the road edge where your house is, and there's a lot of poison hemlock on there, weed eater may not be your best option unless you are properly dressed. So because if that sap does spray on you, it can cause rashes and can make you feel a little woozy. So make sure that you are properly dressed for using a weed eater, long sleeve, long pants, closed-toed shoes, and perhaps even eye protection, because you only get one set of eyes and they're really, really handy. And you should be wearing eye protection anytime you're weed eating anyway.
When I use the weed whacker, I was about to say, that's all I use regardless. Like, I don't care what it is. I could be doing harmless grass, but I'm wearing eye protection, I'm wearing sleeves, I'm wearing long pants, I'm wearing closed-toed shoes, because, that stuff is just irritating, even if it's not supposed to be an irritant, right? So,
well, and
I guess
stuff flies out of things. If anyone has used a weed eater, they know that sometimes it kicks stuff up, and sometimes you get smacked in the face. And just that random offshoot, it's probably a low chance that you'll get hit in the eye, but the risk is just too great.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm wearing eye protection just about all the time. Even drinking my morning coffee.
You must make some strong coffee, Dan.
No, but I mean, that's having eye protection just around equipment, handy all the time. That stuff is given away. I never say no to eye protection. Like, I just take it and I put it in places. And, as I'm doing things, I'm like, would this be a good idea? Well, it's not going to be a bad idea, even if you're not really going to need it. But like, especially for anything that mowing, definitely weed whacking, stuff that flies. Of course you want something. Even a splash hazard, right? For splashing, typically what we recommend are goggles. And depending on, if we go back to herbicides or pesticides in general, they will suggest eye protection, and if it's a product that can cause a lot of eye damage, they will probably recommend goggles, because it does have splash guards. It seals your eyes so that water can't get on the side.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, is just that not all eye protection is created equal. Some eye protection is for impact, some eye protection is for splash, and they don't work the same way. So splash goggles are not going to protect you from high impact, and high impact goggles are not going to protect you from splashes. It's okay to have 2 pairs of goggles here, or 2 pairs of eye protection. It's all right,
Yeah, that's true. Ballistics is one thing and splashing is another thing. Sometimes, depending on the label, they might say, if you have side guards, you're okay. But, just pay attention to that. And it's not a wrong decision to go a little bit more conservative. And, it says it doesn't, maybe goggles aren't required, but I still don't want it, a chance at, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's when you start skipping corners and, not going full on PPE as according to the label, that's when you can get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, it's a really important topic, safety, but I do want to cover something else about poison hemlock before we run out of time, and that is for hay. So typically in a pasture field, the livestock are going to avoid the poison hemlock because it, kind of smells like mouse urine and they don't want to eat it, right? So they'll typically avoid it unless there's nothing else. But when it's in hay, they can't be as selective because they just kind of grab a mouthful and eat it. And so if you have harvested hay with poison hemlock in the field that has bolted and you have those long stems wrapped up in your hay, that could cause some problems. And so if you know that you have harvested hay with poison hemlock, I would really make sure you keep it away from your pregnant cows and your calves, and just set it aside as your low quality hay, even if it's some of the best hay you've ever harvested, because you don't want to risk the cow aborting that calf, and it has been shown to pass through milk. So you don't want the cow to be transferring that toxin to the calf after it's born. So if you're not sure, go out in the field now and see if you have any leftover rosettes out in the field. And if you know that you have it, make sure that you set it aside and keep it away from your pregnant cows and from your calves. And then go out and make sure that you're checking before you do your next hay wrap. Make sure that you've walked through the field, you've tried to look for the rosettes and treated them. And then that way you don't have to worry as much. Now, for the third cut, if you're getting a third cut up, or actually second cut's coming up, isn't it? Yeah, just keep an eye out, look for those tall stems and try to get them out of there before you do your harvest. Or if there's a cluster, like Dan said, they grow in clusters, just mow around that area and leave it standing and don't risk getting that in your hay.
Yeah, pay attention to that. That can really get you in trouble, and different animals have different sensitivities. And here's the kicker. It's just, you don't know when poison plants are going to really affect your animals. It could be that they're getting a bigger bite than they've ever had, or they're just hungry, or whatever. You can go 10 years without a problem, and then boom, you got a problem. But you've never done any management differences. But mitigating those problems are just going to do you good. Another one that I see a lot in the hay fields right now are milkweed. Hemp dogbane is another one that I see. So pay attention to that stuff if you are making hay.
Exactly. Yeah, know the weeds that can poison your livestock and know how to manage them. And if you have questions about weed management in your pasture fields or hay fields, or even in your yard, please reach out to your local extension office, and we will do what we can to help you out. Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.